13 months before Pearl Harbour, Britain carried out an attack so successful that Japan took notes, and the lessons learned that night would help shape one of the most famous military operations in history. November 1940, Britain is standing alone against Hitler. Across the Mediterranean sits one of Europe's most powerful naval forces, the Italian fleet. Protected by anti-aircraft guns, searchlights, fighter aircraft and torpedo nets, the naval base at Taranto is considered virtually untouchable. The Italians believe they're safe, but they couldn't have been more wrong, because at that night, a handful of British aircraft would attempt something many military experts believed was impossible, and in doing so, they would help change naval warfare forever. Act 1. The Age of the Battleship. To understand why Taranto mattered, we need to understand what the world looked like in 1940. At the time, the battleship was king. For nearly 40 years, the world's major navies had engaged in a sort of floating arms race. Every nation wanted bigger ships, bigger guns, thicker armour. The logic was simple. The nation with the strongest battleships would rule the seas. Britain had them, America had them, Japan had them, Italy had them, and nobody expected that to change. Aircraft carriers certainly existed. The Royal Navy had them, the Americans had them, the Japanese had them, but many senior naval admirals still viewed them as kind of supporting acts, useful for reconnaissance, useful for scouting, useful for helping the battleships, but not replacing them. It's a bit like inventing the smartphone and insisting it's mainly used as a torch. Nobody had yet grasped how much warfare was about to change. Then Italy entered the war in 1940, June. Suddenly, Britain had a serious problem. The Italian fleet threatened British shipping routes across the Mediterranean. Those routes connected Britain to Egypt, Malta and the Suez Canal. Lose control of the Mediterranean and Britain's position in the Middle East could become extremely dangerous. The Royal Navy needed to neutralise the Italian fleet, but there was a problem. The Italians rarely ventured out to fight. Instead, they sat inside their safety net inside the harbour at Taranto, and Taranto looked incredibly difficult to attack. Act 2. The Fatal Assumption. Taranto wasn't just another port, it was one of the most heavily defended naval bases in Europe. The harbour was protected by anti-aircraft batteries, searchlights, observation balloons, fighter aircraft, and defensive torpedo nets. But the harbour had another layer of protection, one that nobody had built: the water itself. Taranto's harbour was relatively shallow, around 12 metres deep in many areas. Naval experts believed this made it effectively immune from aerial torpedo attack. The reasoning seems sound. When a torpedo is dropped from an aircraft, it enters the water and dives before stabilising. If the water's too shallow, the torpedo smashes into the seabed. Simple. Or so everyone thought. The Italians believed it. Many British officers believed it. In fact, many Japanese officers believed it too. As we're about to discover, they were all wrong, and that mistake would change history. Act 3. Britain's secret weapon. The Royal Navy's plan depended on an aircraft that looked completely out of place in modern warfare. The fairy Swordfish. If you've never seen one, imagine a flying museum exhibit. Canvas-covered wings, open cockpits, struts and wires everywhere. It looked more at home in 1918 than 1940. German pilots nicknamed it the string bag. Not exactly a terrifying name, yet appearances can be deceptive. The Swordfish was reliable. It could carry a torpedo, and most importantly, could fly slowly and steadily at night. The mastermind behind the operation was Admiral Andrew Cunningham, one of Britain's finest naval commanders. His plan was astonishingly bold. Launch just 21 Swordfish aircraft from the carrier HMS Illustrious, fly over 170 miles across the Mediterranean, attack the fleet at night, and cripple it in a single blow. The operation was codenamed Judgement, a name that would prove remarkably accurate. Before the attack could happen, however, British engineers needed to solve the shallow water problem. Their solution was brilliantly simple. They modified the torpedoes with wooden stabilising fins and other adaptations that reduced how deeply they dived after entering the water. Nobody had attempted anything quite like it before, and now was the time to see if it actually worked. Act 4. The night of the attack. It was around 8:30 on the 11th of November 1940. The first wave lifted off the HMS Illustrious. Imagine being one of those pilots. You're sitting in an open cockpit, it's dark, the Mediterranean stretches beneath you. No GPS, no satellite navigation, no modern electronics, just a map, a compass, and a very dangerous mission. As the aircraft approached Taranto, searchlights suddenly pierced the darkness. The Italians had spotted them. Anti-aircraft guns erupted across the harbour. Tracer rounds filled the night sky, but the Swordfish pressed on. Some aircraft dropped flares. The harbour below lit up like it was daylight. And suddenly, the Italian fleet was exposed. The torpedo bombers descended, one after another, flying low over the water, closing in on their targets. Then came the hits. The battleship Littorio was struck multiple times. Caudillo was badly damaged. Conte di Cavo suffered catastrophic damage and would never return to active service. In just a few hours, the British had crippled half of Italy's battleship force, and they did it for the loss of only 2 aircraft. The results stunned the world, but nobody was paying closer attention than the Japanese. Thousands of miles away, Japanese naval planners studied the attack with enormous interest, and for good reason. Japan had a problem of its own. If war came with America, the US Pacific Fleet would be based at Pearl Harbour, and Pearl Harbour shared a critical feature with Taranto. It was shallow. Many experts believed torpedo attacks wouldn't work there. Sound familiar? Japanese planners began analysing reports from Taranto. They wanted to understand exactly how the British had achieved the impossible. One of the key figures involved in the planning of Pearl Harbour was Commander Genda. He and others carefully examined the lessons emerging from the Mediterranean. Now, it's important to be accurate here. Pearl Harbour was not simply a copy of Taranto. The Japanese developed their own tactics, their own aircraft, their own planning, but Taranto provided something of incredible value. Proof. Proof that a carrier strike could devastate a fleet at anchor. Proof that shallow harbours were vulnerable. Proof that battleships were no longer untouchable. For Japanese planners, Taranto wasn't the plan, it was the evidence that the plan could work. When Japanese aircraft appeared over Pearl Harbour on the morning of the 7th of December 1941, the world witnessed a revolution. Battleships that had dominated naval thinking for a generation suddenly looked vulnerable. Aircraft carriers had announced themselves as the future, but that revolution didn't begin in Hawaii. It began 13 months earlier in southern Italy with 21 British biplanes. Taranto shattered decades of naval assumptions. It proved that no harbour was completely safe. It proved that air power could destroy a fleet without a traditional naval battle. And perhaps, most importantly, it showed military planners around the world what was now possible, including in Japan. So remember, the promise we started with: did Britain inspire Pearl Harbour? Well, not directly, but Taranto gave Japanese planners something just as important: confidence. Confidence that a carrier strike against a fleet in shallow water could succeed. And once that lesson had been learned, naval warfare would never be the same again. The attack that changed the Pacific may have happened first in the Mediterranean, and most people have never heard of it.